They called her a weekend warrior who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. What they didn't know was that Emma Chen had once held the world record for the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, and she was about to remind everyone that legends don't disappear, they just learn to hide in plain sight. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Patterson's indoor shooting range, casting long shadows across the concrete floor that had seen better days sometime in the previous decade. Emma Chen adjusted her ill-fitting safety glasses and tried to ignore the smell of gun oil mixed with stale coffee that seemed permanently embedded in the building's walls. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 36, she had traded her military precision for suburban anonymity, and this rundown facility on the outskirts of Denver had become her weekly refuge from a world that no longer understood what she had once been. The range occupied a converted warehouse in an industrial district where chain-link fences separated abandoned lots from functioning businesses that somehow managed to survive despite the neighborhood's steady decline. Patterson's had been operating in the same location for 43 years, according to the faded newspaper clipping hanging behind the front counter. The building's exterior was weathered brick and peeling paint that gave no hint of the sophisticated shooting lanes contained within its walls. Emma's Tuesday morning routine had remained unchanged for the past 14 months, since she had discovered this particular establishment. She would arrive precisely at 8:30, when the range opened to the public but before the serious enthusiasts and weekend warriors began filtering in for their weekly practice sessions. The early timing allowed her to claim Lane 15, positioned at the far end of the facility where she could shoot without drawing attention from other patrons or the staff members who monitored the range floor. Her equipment bag was deliberately modest, containing a basic rifle that would blend in with the weapons used by recreational shooters, the Remington 700-in. 308 Winchester had been purchased from a sporting goods store using cash and paperwork that established her civilian identity without raising questions about her background or qualifications. To anyone observing her setup routine, Emma appeared to be exactly what she claimed to be, a divorced accountant who had taken up target shooting as a hobby following her recent relocation to Colorado. The transformation from her previous life had been as complete as it was intentional. Emma's military service records were buried beneath layers of classification that made her existence as a special operations sniper invisible to anyone without the highest security clearances. Her discharge papers listed her final rank as staff sergeant, a deliberate understatement that concealed 15 years of service in positions that officially didn't exist within the military's organizational structure. The apartment where Emma lived reflected the same careful attention to ordinary appearances that characterized every aspect of her civilian life. Generic furniture from discount retailers filled rooms painted in neutral colors that could belong to any single woman establishing a new life in an unfamiliar city. Her neighbors in the middle-class complex knew her as a quiet professional who worked from home doing bookkeeping for small businesses, a cover story that explained her irregular schedule and tendency towards solitude. But hidden in a climate-controlled storage unit across town, sealed in waterproof cases that protected them from humidity and temperature fluctuations, lay the artifacts of her true identity. Custom rifles built to specifications that pushed the boundaries of precision manufacturing, optic systems that cost more than most people's annual salaries, logbooks documenting shots taken at distances that existed beyond the imagination of civilian marksmen. These tools represented capabilities that had been developed through years of training and combat experience in environments where missing a target meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Emma's morning routine at Patterson's began with the same methodical preparation that had once characterized her approach to operational missions. She would claim her assigned lane, set up her shooting mat with military precision, and begin the process of establishing her shooting position. Her movements were economical and practiced, but deliberately casual enough to avoid drawing attention from the range staff or other shooters who might wonder why a recreational hobbyist displayed such systematic attention to detail. The targets she selected were standard paper bullseyes purchased from the range's supply counter, nothing that would suggest she was capable of engaging anything more challenging than basic accuracy exercises. Her shooting distances were kept within the range's maximum limit of 100 yards, far shorter than the extreme ranges where her actual capabilities had been proven under combat conditions. Every shot was calculated to demonstrate competent but unremarkable marksmanship that would reinforce her cover identity without revealing the precision that had once made her legendary within the special operations community. Emma's interaction with other range patrons was carefully managed to maintain the appearance of someone still learning the fundamentals of precision shooting. She would occasionally ask basic questions about scope adjustments or ammunition selection, inquiries that established her as a novice who was gradually improving through regular practice. Her shooting groups were deliberately expanded to show consistent but unexceptional accuracy that would not attract unwanted attention or questions about her background. The staff at Patterson's had accepted Emma as a regular customer, who posed no problems and required minimal supervision. Her paperwork was always in order, her range fees paid in advance, and her adherence to safety protocols beyond reproach. She arrived on schedule, shot her predetermined number of rounds, and left without engaging in the social interactions that might lead to uncomfortable questions about her experience or qualifications. But beneath this carefully constructed facade of mediocrity lay capabilities that had been forged through years of training that pushed human performance to its absolute limits. Emma's military service had begun with conventional infantry training, but her exceptional marksmanship scores had quickly identified her as a candidate for specialized instruction. The selection process for the military's most elite sniper programs was notorious for its psychological and physical demands, designed to identify individuals who possessed the rare combination of technical skill, mental discipline, and emotional stability required for long-range precision work. Her training had taken place at facilities whose locations remained classified, under the instruction of veterans whose achievements could never be publicly acknowledged. The curriculum extended far beyond basic marksmanship to include advanced ballistics calculations, environmental factors affecting bullet trajectory, and the psychological techniques required to maintain perfect stability during extended shooting sequences. Emma had learned to account for wind patterns at multiple altitudes, temperature variations that affected ammunition performance, and the Coriolis effect that influenced bullet flight over extreme distances. The weapons systems that Emma had mastered during her military career represented the pinnacle of precision rifle technology. Custom-built platforms that incorporated the latest advances in barrel manufacturing, trigger systems, and optical equipment. Her primary rifle had been a Slock 338 Lapua Magnum configured specifically for her physical dimensions and shooting style, capable of delivering consistent accuracy at ranges that extended beyond 2,000 meters under optimal conditions. But technical expertise alone had not been sufficient for the missions that defined Emma's military career. The psychological demands of precision shooting under combat stress required mental conditioning that went far beyond normal military training. She had learned to control her breathing, heart rate, and muscle tension with the precision of a meditation master, maintaining perfect physiological stability while calculating complex ballistic solutions in her head. The ability to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect shot had been developed through exercises that tested the limits of human endurance and concentration. Emma's deployment history included operations in environments that tested every aspect of her training and equipment. Desert conditions where heat shimmer affected target identification and wind patterns changed constantly throughout the day. Mountain operations where altitude and temperature variations required constant recalculation of ballistic solutions. Urban environments where precision was measured in inches rather than feet, and where collateral damage could compromise entire missions or endanger civilian populations. Her most challenging assignment had involved a counter-sniper mission in an undisclosed location where enemy marksmen had been systematically eliminating coalition personnel from positions that seemed impossible to identify or engage. Emma had spent 11 days in concealment, moving between carefully prepared positions while hunting an opponent whose skills nearly matched her own. The successful conclusion of that mission had established her reputation within the special operations community, but the psychological toll of the extended hunt had contributed to her eventual decision to leave military service. The transition to civilian life had been complicated by the classified nature of Emma's military experience and the psychological challenges that accompanied her return to a world where her skills were not only unnecessary but potentially dangerous. The precision that had once been essential for mission success became a liability in environments where normal human imperfection was expected and valued. Her hypervigilance and constant threat assessment, once crucial for survival, now marked her as someone who didn't quite fit into civilian social interactions. Emma's choice to settle in Denver had been influenced by the city's proximity to mountain ranges where she could practice her skills in isolation, away from the questions and scrutiny that might arise at more conventional shooting facilities. The altitude and environmental conditions were similar to some of her previous operational areas, allowing her to maintain her capabilities while avoiding the attention that would come from joining competitive shooting organizations or seeking employment that utilized her military background. Her cover story as a freelance accountant provided the flexibility she needed to maintain her training regimen while generating sufficient income to support her modest lifestyle. The work was intellectually undemanding but financially adequate, allowing her to focus on the psychological adjustment that represented her primary challenge in civilian life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The clients who employed her services knew her as a competent professional who delivered accurate work on schedule, never suspecting that their quiet bookkeeper had once been one of the military's most effective precision weapons. Emma's apartment reflected the same deliberate ordinariness that characterized every aspect of her civilian identity. The furniture was functional but unremarkable, selected from discount retailers and arranged in ways that suggested someone rebuilding her life after a divorce. Family photographs displayed on the mantel showed relatives who existed only in the fictional background she had constructed to explain her presence in Denver. Even her reading material was carefully chosen to reinforce the impression of someone whose interests ran toward romance novels and self-help books, rather than military history or technical manuals. The psychological challenges of maintaining this false identity were more demanding than Emma had anticipated when she first began her transition to civilian life. The constant need to suppress her natural responses and capabilities required mental energy that left her exhausted by the end of each day. Simple activities like shopping for groceries became exercises in acting, as she forced herself to move and behave like someone who had never received military training or combat experience. Her relationship with other residents of the apartment complex was carefully managed to maintain friendly but superficial connections that would not lead to deeper inquiries about her background. She participated in community activities just enough to avoid seeming antisocial, but never to the extent that would require detailed explanations of her past or present circumstances. The neighbors who occasionally encountered her in the hallways or parking areas knew her as a quiet professional who kept to herself but caused no problems for the building management. Emma's weekly visits to Patterson's shooting range represented the only time when she could safely engage with activities that connected her to her military identity. Even there, she was forced to dramatically limit her capabilities to avoid raising questions that could compromise her carefully constructed cover story. The 100-yard maximum distance at the range was laughably short compared to the extreme ranges where she had once operated, but it provided an outlet for maintaining basic marksmanship skills while allowing her to feel some connection to her former life. The other patrons at Patterson's were typical of recreational shooters found at similar facilities across the country. Weekend enthusiasts who enjoyed the technical challenges of precision shooting but lacked the training or equipment necessary for serious competitive or professional-level performance. Their conversations centered on ammunition preferences, equipment modifications, and the relative merits of different rifle manufacturers. Emma listened to these discussions with the patience of someone who understood that their perspectives were limited by their experience, while contributing just enough to maintain her cover as someone still learning the fundamentals. The range's staff consisted of a manager and several part-time employees who supervised the shooting lanes and provided basic instruction to customers who requested assistance. Their knowledge was adequate for the facility's clientele, but Emma often heard advice that was technically incorrect or oversimplified. She forced herself to accept their guidance without correction, knowing that demonstrating superior knowledge would raise questions about where and how she had acquired such expertise. Emma's relationship with firearms had been fundamentally altered by her military experience in ways that civilian shooters could never fully understand. For recreational marksmen, shooting was a hobby that provided technical challenges and social interaction in a controlled environment where safety was paramount and consequences were measured in scores rather than lives. For Emma, weapons had been tools of survival and mission accomplishment, extensions of her capabilities that required absolute mastery and constant maintenance. The psychological association between shooting and life-or-death situations had made Emma's adjustment to recreational marksmanship particularly challenging. Every time she handled a rifle, her mind automatically began calculating environmental factors, threat assessments, and tactical considerations that were completely inappropriate for a civilian shooting range. The hypervigilance that had kept her alive during combat deployments now made it difficult to relax and enjoy shooting as a recreational activity. But Patterson's shooting range provided Emma with something she could find nowhere else in her civilian life: a connection to skills and identity that had defined her for 15 years of military service. Even though she was forced to dramatically limit her capabilities and maintain the pretense of being a novice shooter, the familiar weight of a rifle in her hands and the mental discipline required for precision shooting provided psychological benefits that helped her cope with the isolation and identity confusion that characterized her transition to civilian life. The morning routine that Emma had established at the range served multiple purposes beyond simple marksmanship practice. The structured activity provided a sense of purpose and accomplishment that was often missing from her civilian work. The physical and mental discipline required for accurate shooting helped maintain skills that she feared losing through disuse. Most importantly, the time spent at the range allowed her to safely engage with aspects of her military identity without compromising the anonymity that protected her from unwanted attention or questions about her background. Emma's equipment choices reflected the same careful balance between capability and concealment that characterized every aspect of her civilian life. The rifle she used at Patterson's was accurate enough to maintain her basic skills, but unremarkable enough to avoid drawing attention from other shooters or range staff. Her shooting accessories were similarly modest, selected from mainstream manufacturers, and configured in ways that would be familiar to recreational marksmen. The ammunition Emma used for her practice sessions was standard commercial loads purchased from the range's inventory rather than the specialized hand-loaded cartridges that had been optimized for her military weapons systems. The performance difference was significant, but not relevant for the distances and accuracy requirements of civilian recreational shooting. Using commercially available ammunition also eliminated questions that might arise if she appeared at the range with custom loads that suggested access to specialized reloading equipment or technical knowledge. Emma's shooting positions and techniques were deliberately simplified compared to the advanced methods she had mastered during military training. She used basic prone positions with standard shooting rests, rather than the specialized support systems and body positioning techniques that had enabled her extreme range precision work. Her breathing and trigger control remained perfect, but she was careful to avoid displaying the level of consistency that would suggest professional-level training. The targets that Emma engaged during her practice sessions were standard paper bullseyes that provided adequate feedback for maintaining basic accuracy without requiring the sophisticated target analysis that had been essential for her military missions. She deliberately varied her shooting groups to simulate the performance of someone still developing fundamental skills, occasionally placing shots outside the optimal scoring zones to reinforce her cover identity as a recreational shooter. Emma's interaction with the range's chronograph equipment, which measured bullet velocity, was carefully managed to avoid revealing her knowledge of advanced ballistics calculations. She would occasionally use the device to satisfy curiosity about her ammunition's performance, but never in ways that suggested familiarity with the complex velocity measurements and ballistic coefficients that had been essential for her military shooting calculations. The logbook that Emma maintained for her civilian shooting activities contained only the basic information that recreational shooters typically recorded: dates, ammunition used, shooting distances, and general accuracy observations. Missing were the detailed environmental conditions, precise measurements, and analytical data that had characterized her military shooting records. The civilian logbook was deliberately amateurish in its format and content, designed to reinforce her cover story rather than provide the comprehensive documentation that would be useful for serious marksmanship development. Emma's knowledge of the other regular customers at Patterson's was limited to what she could observe during her brief visits and the casual conversations that occurred while shooters prepared their equipment or cleaned up after practice sessions. She recognized the patterns and preferences of the various individuals who frequented the range, but was careful to avoid the deeper relationships that might lead to invitations for social activities or questions about her background and experience. The psychological discipline required to maintain her cover identity while engaging in activities so closely connected to her military service was more challenging than Emma had anticipated when she first began visiting Patterson's. Every aspect of her behavior had to be consciously controlled to avoid displaying the automatic responses and capabilities that had been ingrained through years of intensive training. The constant self-monitoring was mentally exhausting but necessary to protect the anonymity that allowed her to continue living in relative peace. As Emma completed her morning shooting session and began packing her equipment, she reflected on the strange reality of her current existence. The woman who had once been trusted with missions that could influence international conflicts now spent her days maintaining financial records for small businesses and pretending to be a novice marksman at a neighborhood shooting range. The transformation was complete and necessary, but the psychological cost of suppressing her true identity continued to challenge her adaptation to civilian life. The drive back to her apartment took Emma through neighborhoods that had become familiar during her 14 months in Denver, but which still felt temporary rather than permanent. She had learned to navigate the traffic patterns and locate the services she needed for daily life, but had been careful to avoid the deeper community connections that might compromise her anonymity or require explanations of her background. Her existence remained deliberately superficial, designed to provide cover rather than fulfillment. Emma's afternoon would be spent on accounting work for clients who valued her accuracy and reliability without questioning the source of her meticulous attention to detail. The skills that had once been applied to calculating ballistic solutions and analyzing environmental factors were now used to reconcile financial statements and prepare tax documents. The work was intellectually unstimulating but financially adequate, providing the income necessary to maintain her modest lifestyle while avoiding employment situations that might reveal her military background. The routine that Emma had established in Denver represented a careful balance between maintaining her psychological stability and protecting the anonymity that allowed her to live without constant scrutiny from government agencies or former colleagues who might not understand her decision to abandon her military career. Every aspect of her civilian life had been designed to provide cover for someone whose actual capabilities and experience exceeded anything that her neighbors, clients, or fellow range members could imagine. But beneath the surface of this carefully constructed ordinary existence lay the reality of someone whose skills remained as sharp as the day she had left military service. The precision that had once made her legendary among special operations personnel had not diminished through disuse, and the mental discipline that had enabled her extreme-range shooting remained intact, despite her current environment's lack of challenge or recognition. Emma Chen had successfully transformed herself from one of the military's most effective precision weapons into an anonymous civilian whose capabilities remained hidden behind a facade of suburban normalcy. The desk job and weekend shooting hobby provided cover for someone whose true identity would reshape everything if it were ever revealed. But for now, she was content to remain invisible, processing financial records instead of eliminating high-value targets, and pretending to learn marksmanship skills that she had mastered decades earlier. The quiet woman who cleaned her rifle each Tuesday morning while the other shooters prepared for their practice sessions was exactly who she appeared to be, a divorced accountant rebuilding her life in a new city. What none of them suspected was that the same hands that carefully maintained a basic hunting rifle had once wielded precision instruments capable of delivering death at distances that challenged the laws of physics, and that the woman they saw as a harmless hobbyist was actually a ghost from a world of classified operations where legends were made and heroes learned to hide in plain sight. Marcus Patterson had inherited the shooting range from his father, along with a set of deeply ingrained beliefs about firearms, marksmanship, and the natural order of things that women could and couldn't accomplish with a rifle. At 58, he possessed the confidence of someone who had spent 4 decades around guns, and the certainty that came from never having his assumptions seriously challenged by anyone whose opinion he respected. His weathered hands bore the calluses of a man who had built targets, repaired equipment, and handled every type of firearm that passed through his facility, and his gravelly voice carried the authority of experience that most customers accepted without question. The range that bore his family name had been Marcus's domain since his father's retirement 15 years earlier, and he had maintained the facility's reputation as a place where serious shooters could practice without interference from bureaucratic regulations or politically correct attitudes about firearms ownership. The building's interior reflected his practical approach to business operations, with functional equipment that prioritized reliability over appearance and an atmosphere that catered to customers who valued substance over style. Marcus took pride in knowing the capabilities and limitations of every regular customer, and his assessments were typically accurate enough to predict performance before the first shot was fired. His morning routine began at 7:30 with a systematic inspection of the shooting lanes, target systems, and safety equipment that would be used throughout the day. Marcus had learned from his father that proper maintenance prevented the equipment failures and safety incidents that could destroy a range's reputation and generate unwanted attention from regulatory agencies. His attention to detail was meticulous, but his standards were based on decades of experience rather than formal training in range management or safety protocols. The customers who frequented Patterson's fell into categories that Marcus could identify within minutes of their arrival at the facility. Weekend warriors who owned expensive equipment but lacked the fundamental skills necessary for accurate shooting. Competitive shooters who possessed technical knowledge and dedication but often lacked the practical experience that came from real-world applications. Hunters who understood their limitations and sought to improve their field shooting capabilities through regular practice. Military veterans whose service had provided them with basic marksmanship training, but who rarely possessed the advanced skills that their civilian careers had led them to believe they had developed. Marcus's interactions with female customers were guided by assumptions that had been reinforced through years of observation and experience at the range. Women, in his view, typically lacked the physical strength necessary for handling larger caliber rifles effectively. Their approach to shooting was often tentative and emotional rather than systematic and analytical. They required more instruction and supervision than male customers, and their progress was generally slower and less consistent. These beliefs were not based on malice or deliberate discrimination, but on what Marcus considered to be objective observations about gender differences in mechanical aptitude and competitive performance. Emma Chen had first appeared at Patterson's on a quiet Tuesday morning 14 months earlier, and her initial impression had confirmed every expectation that Marcus held about female recreational shooters. She had approached the counter with the hesitant manner of someone unfamiliar with range protocols, asked basic questions about lane rental and equipment requirements, and selected a rifle that was appropriate for a novice marksman. Her paperwork had been completed, with the careful attention to detail that suggested someone anxious about making mistakes, and her equipment choices reflected the conservative approach typical of customers who lacked confidence in their abilities. During Emma's early visits to the range, Marcus had observed her shooting with the casual attention he devoted to all new customers who might require intervention if safety violations occurred. Her setup routine was methodical but inefficient, suggesting someone following written instructions rather than relying on experience. Her shooting positions were textbook correct, but lacked the natural flow that developed through extensive practice. Her accuracy was adequate for a recreational shooter but unremarkable compared to the performance of customers who possessed natural talent or professional training. Marcus's assessment of Emma had stabilized after her first month of regular visits, categorizing her as a reliable customer who would continue visiting the range without requiring special attention or generating problems that might disrupt other shooters. She paid her fees promptly, followed safety protocols without reminder, and maintained her equipment properly. Her shooting performance showed gradual improvement that was consistent with someone dedicating regular practice time to developing fundamental skills, but nothing that suggested exceptional potential or hidden expertise. The relationship between Marcus and Emma had developed into the professional courtesy that characterized his interactions with all regular customers, who caused no problems and required minimal supervision. He would acknowledge her arrival with a nod, process her lane rental without conversation, and monitor her activities with the same casual attention he devoted to other shooters who had established their competence and reliability. Their interactions were limited to brief exchanges about range conditions, equipment availability, and payment processing. Marcus's confidence in his ability to assess shooter capabilities had been developed through decades of observation and reinforced by his success in predicting customer performance and identifying potential problems before they occurred. His evaluations were based on factors that included equipment choices, setup routines, shooting positions, and the subtle behavioral indicators that revealed experience levels and natural aptitude. He had learned to recognize the difference between shooters who possessed genuine skill and those who simply owned expensive equipment, between customers who would improve through practice and those who had reached their performance plateaus. The shooting community that frequented Patterson's included several individuals whose abilities Marcus respected and whose opinions he valued when discussing marksmanship techniques and equipment preferences. These customers had demonstrated their competence through consistent performance and had earned his recognition through years of reliable shooting and adherence to range protocols. Their conversations with Marcus often focused on technical aspects of ballistics, equipment modifications, and shooting techniques that went beyond the basic instruction he provided to novice customers. Among the range's regular customers was Detective Ray Sullivan from the Denver Police Department, whose monthly qualification requirements brought him to Patterson's for practice sessions that maintained his departmental certification. Sullivan's shooting was competent but unremarkable, reflecting the basic marksmanship training provided by law enforcement agencies, rather than the advanced skills that would distinguish him from other professional users. Marcus respected Sullivan's position and experience, but their discussions typically focused on practical law enforcement applications rather than precision shooting techniques. Another frequent visitor was Jack Morrison, a retired Army sergeant who had served 2 deployments in Afghanistan and possessed the mechanical knowledge and shooting experience that Marcus associated with military training. Morrison's performance at the range was solid and consistent, demonstrating the fundamental skills that military service had provided while lacking the exceptional accuracy that would indicate specialized sniper training. His conversations with Marcus often included stories from his deployment experience and observations about equipment and techniques that had been effective in combat situations. The presence of these customers provided Marcus with reference points for evaluating the capabilities of other shooters who used his facility. Sullivan and Morrison represented the level of performance that Marcus expected from professionals who used firearms in their careers, and their shooting served as benchmarks for assessing the claims and capabilities of customers who might exaggerate their experience or abilities. Neither man had ever demonstrated the kind of exceptional marksmanship that would challenge Marcus's understanding of what was possible within the limitations of his range facility. Marcus's knowledge of firearms and ballistics had been acquired through practical experience rather than formal education, and his understanding was sufficient for the operational requirements of managing a shooting range but limited compared to the technical expertise possessed by serious competitive shooters or military professionals. He could provide basic instruction in marksmanship fundamentals, recommend appropriate equipment for different applications, and troubleshoot common problems that affected shooting accuracy. His advice was generally sound for recreational shooters, but he occasionally made statements about ballistics and shooting techniques that were oversimplified or technically incorrect. The limitations of Patterson's facility reflected both budget constraints and Marcus's practical approach to range management. The maximum shooting distance of 100 yards was adequate for most recreational applications and law enforcement training requirements, but insufficient for the long-range precision work that characterized advanced marksmanship disciplines. The target systems were functional but basic, providing adequate feedback for accuracy assessment without the sophisticated measurement capabilities that would be useful for serious competitive shooting or professional development. Marcus's attitude toward shooting distances beyond his range's capabilities was dismissive, based on his belief that extreme long-range shooting was an impractical specialization that had limited relevance for most firearms applications. He frequently expressed the opinion that shooters who claimed to engage targets at distances exceeding several hundred yards were either exaggerating their achievements or engaging in activities that had more to do with equipment capabilities than marksmanship skill. His experience with customers who discussed long-range shooting was typically limited to individuals whose actual performance at his facility failed to support their claims about distant shooting capabilities. The conversations that occurred at Patterson's often included discussions about shooting techniques, equipment preferences, and the relative merits of different approaches to marksmanship training. Marcus participated in these discussions with the authority of someone whose experience provided valuable insights, and his opinions were generally respected by customers who valued his practical knowledge and range management expertise. His statements about shooting capabilities and limitations were rarely challenged by patrons who lacked the technical knowledge or experience necessary to identify the gaps in his understanding. Emma's participation in these conversations had been minimal during her months as a regular customer, consistent with her apparent status as someone still learning fundamental shooting skills. She would occasionally ask basic questions about equipment or techniques, but her inquiries were typical of novice shooters seeking guidance rather than someone possessed of advanced knowledge testing the accuracy of information being provided. Her shooting performance had supported this impression, demonstrating competent but unremarkable accuracy that was consistent with recreational-level marksmanship training. Marcus's assessment of Emma's potential had been established early in their relationship and had remained unchanged as her shooting performance gradually improved within the expected parameters for someone dedicating regular practice time to skill development. He viewed her as a reliable customer whose shooting would continue improving slowly but who would never achieve the exceptional accuracy that characterized truly gifted marksmen. Her equipment choices and shooting techniques reinforced this evaluation, suggesting someone following standard instruction rather than applying advanced knowledge or natural talent to marksmanship challenges. The range's atmosphere during Emma's Tuesday morning visits was typically quiet and focused, with few customers present to observe shooting or engage in conversations that might reveal information about capabilities or experience. Marcus's attention during these periods was divided between routine maintenance tasks and casual monitoring of the shooters present, providing opportunities for extended observation of individual performance without the distractions that occurred during busier periods. His assessment of Emma's shooting had been based on hundreds of hours of such observation, creating confidence in his evaluation of her capabilities and limitations. The equipment that Emma used during her practice sessions had been examined by Marcus on several occasions when she had requested assistance with scope adjustments or rifle maintenance. Her weapon was a quality hunting rifle that was appropriate for recreational shooting but unremarkable compared to the precision instruments used by serious competitive shooters or professional marksmen. The scope was adequate for her shooting requirements and properly mounted, but lacked the advanced features that would enable the precise adjustments necessary for extreme accuracy or long-range applications. Marcus's understanding of Emma's background was limited to the information she had provided during her initial registration and the casual conversations that had occurred during her visits to the range. She had identified herself as someone new to shooting who was seeking to develop marksmanship skills as a recreational activity, and her performance had been consistent with this explanation. Her questions and comments suggested someone learning from books and basic instruction rather than drawing on previous experience or advanced training, and her shooting techniques reflected the systematic approach of someone following established protocols rather than applying intuitive knowledge. The relationship between Marcus and his regular customers was based on mutual respect for range protocols and shared interest in firearms and marksmanship. But he maintained professional boundaries that prevented the development of personal relationships that might compromise his objectivity or create conflicts of interest. His interactions with Emma had followed this pattern, acknowledging her reliability and compliance with range rules while maintaining the appropriate distance between range management and customer service. Their conversations had been limited to technical topics related to shooting and range operations, avoiding personal subjects that might reveal information about backgrounds or experiences. Marcus's confidence in his ability to evaluate shooter capabilities extended beyond simple accuracy assessment to include predictions about potential for improvement and identification of customers who might benefit from advanced instruction or equipment upgrades. His recommendations were based on observation of shooting performance, combined with assessment of customer attitudes and dedication to practice, and his advice had generally proven accurate for customers who followed his suggestions. Emma's shooting had developed along the trajectory he had predicted, showing steady but unremarkable improvement that was consistent with recreational-level commitment and natural aptitude. The shooting techniques that Marcus observed Emma using during her practice sessions were fundamentally sound but lacked the refinements that would indicate advanced training or exceptional natural ability. Her breathing and trigger control were adequate for recreational accuracy requirements, but not precise enough for the consistency demanded by competitive shooting or professional applications. Her shooting positions were stable and comfortable, but not optimized for the maximum accuracy that could be achieved through advanced positioning techniques and specialized equipment configurations. Marcus's discussions with other range customers about Emma's shooting had been limited to brief observations about her reliability and compliance with range protocols, without detailed analysis of her technical performance or potential for improvement. His comments had been generally positive but unremarkable, consistent with his assessment of her as a competent recreational shooter who caused no problems and demonstrated appropriate respect for range safety requirements. Other customers had expressed similar opinions based on their own casual observations of her shooting performance. The seasonal variations in range usage provided Marcus with opportunities to observe Emma's shooting under different conditions, and with varying levels of distraction from other customers present during her practice sessions. Her performance had remained consistent regardless of environmental factors or the presence of other shooters, suggesting someone who had developed adequate concentration and shooting discipline for recreational requirements. Her shooting had not shown the exceptional consistency that would indicate professional-level training or the variability that might suggest performance anxiety or inadequate fundamental skills. Marcus's knowledge of competitive shooting and professional marksmanship applications was sufficient for range management requirements, but limited compared to the expertise possessed by individuals who had participated in high-level competition or military precision shooting programs. His understanding of ballistics calculations, environmental factors affecting accuracy, and advanced shooting techniques was based on practical experience and general knowledge rather than specialized training or technical education. This background provided adequate foundation for managing a recreational shooting facility, but could lead to oversimplified explanations or inaccurate assessments when discussing advanced marksmanship applications. The conversations that occurred at Patterson's during busy periods often included discussions about shooting achievements and capabilities that were difficult to verify within the limitations of the range facility. Marcus had learned to evaluate such claims based on demonstrated performance at his range, applying the practical test of actual shooting results rather than accepting unsubstantiated statements about previous achievements or training. His skepticism about extraordinary claims was reinforced by experience with customers whose actual performance failed to support their assertions about exceptional capabilities or professional backgrounds. Emma's participation in these discussions had been limited to occasional questions and brief comments that were consistent with her apparent status as someone learning fundamental shooting skills. She had never made claims about previous experience or exceptional capabilities, and her questions had focused on basic technical topics rather than advanced applications that might suggest hidden expertise. Her demeanor during these conversations had been that of someone seeking information, rather than someone possessed of knowledge that might challenge or correct statements made by other participants. The reputation that Patterson's had established within the local shooting community was based on providing reliable facilities and fair treatment for customers who respected range protocols and safety requirements. Marcus's management style emphasized practical functionality over elaborate amenities, creating an atmosphere that appealed to serious recreational shooters while discouraging customers who sought social interaction more than shooting practice. His approach had been successful in developing a stable customer base that provided consistent revenue without generating the conflicts or safety incidents that could threaten the range's operations. Marcus's evaluation of Emma as a customer had been entirely positive based on her reliability, safety compliance, and respectful interaction with range staff and other shooters. She represented the ideal recreational customer from a business perspective, requiring minimal supervision while generating consistent revenue through regular visits and equipment purchases. Her shooting performance was adequate to justify her continued use of range facilities without creating safety concerns or generating complaints from other customers who might be affected by inadequate marksmanship or unsafe practices. The training philosophy that Marcus had developed through his experience managing the range emphasized fundamental shooting skills and safe practices over advanced techniques that might be impractical for recreational applications. His instruction focused on basic marksmanship principles that could be applied effectively within the limitations of standard sporting equipment and range facilities, avoiding specialized techniques that required advanced equipment or training that exceeded the scope of recreational shooting activities. This approach had been effective for developing competent recreational shooters, but might not identify or develop exceptional natural talent that could benefit from more advanced instruction. Marcus's relationship with Emma had been established on the foundation of her apparent status as a recreational shooter, seeking to develop basic marksmanship skills through regular practice and gradual improvement. Her performance and behavior had been consistent with this assessment throughout her months as a regular customer, creating confidence in his evaluation of her capabilities and potential. The stability of this relationship had been beneficial for both parties, providing Emma with access to range facilities without unwanted attention or pressure to demonstrate capabilities beyond her apparent level, while giving Marcus a reliable customer who required minimal management attention. The morning routine that had developed around Emma's Tuesday visits represented the kind of predictable, low-maintenance customer relationship that Marcus preferred for his range operations. Her consistent arrival time, efficient use of range facilities, and prompt departure allowed him to plan other activities around her presence without concern about disruptions or unexpected demands on his attention. Her shooting performance was sufficient to justify her continued use of the facility without creating any need for additional instruction or intervention that might complicate the straightforward business relationship they had established. Marcus Patterson had successfully categorized Emma Chen as exactly what she appeared to be, a competent recreational shooter whose capabilities were adequate for her apparent purposes but unremarkable compared to the exceptional marksmanship that characterized truly gifted shooters or professionally trained marksmen. His assessment was based on months of direct observation and had been confirmed by her consistent performance within the expected parameters for someone of her apparent background and experience. What Marcus could never have imagined was that the quiet woman who arrived each Tuesday morning was actually a former military sniper, whose true capabilities existed so far beyond his understanding that her weekly visits represented the most severe limitation of her skills that she had ever voluntarily accepted. The woman he saw as a dependable amateur was actually one of the most accomplished precision shooters in military history, and his confidence in his ability to evaluate shooting capabilities was about to be challenged in ways that would fundamentally alter his understanding of what was possible when someone with legendary skills finally decided to reveal their true identity. The confrontation began on a humid Thursday afternoon when Emma arrived at Patterson's to find the range buzzing with an unusual level of activity. A group of competitive shooters had gathered around Lane 12, their expensive equipment and animated discussion creating an atmosphere of excitement that was uncommon for the typically quiet facility. Emma recognized several faces from previous visits, but the energy in the room suggested something significant was happening that went beyond routine practice sessions. Marcus Patterson stood at the center of the group, his voice carrying across the range floor as he gestured toward a target that had been positioned at the facility's maximum distance of 100 yards. The paper bullseye showed a grouping of shots that was impressive by recreational standards, with 5 rounds clustered within the 10 ring in a pattern that demonstrated exceptional consistency and precision. The shooter responsible for the group was Brad Coleman, a local competitive marksman who had recently returned from a regional tournament where his performance had earned recognition and several equipment sponsorships. Coleman's achievement had sparked a discussion about the limits of practical marksmanship and the distances at which accurate shooting became more dependent on equipment capabilities than individual skill. His assertion that precision shooting beyond 300 yards was largely a matter of having sufficient magnification and favorable environmental conditions had met with general agreement from the assembled shooters, most of whom had never attempted to engage targets at such extreme ranges. Emma positioned herself at her usual Lane 15, maintaining the peripheral awareness that had become second nature during her months of observing range dynamics while protecting her carefully constructed anonymity. The conversation at Lane 12 continued to focus on the technical aspects of long-range shooting, with participants sharing opinions about ballistic calculations, environmental factors, and equipment requirements that revealed both genuine knowledge and significant misconceptions about precision marksmanship at extended distances. Marcus's voice rose above the discussion, as he addressed the group with the authority that his position and experience had earned him among the range's regular customers. His statement would later be remembered by everyone present as the moment when assumptions about capabilities and limitations collided with reality in ways that no one could have anticipated. "Listen, I've been running this range for 15 years, and I've seen every type of shooter you can imagine," Marcus declared, his tone carrying the confidence of someone whose opinions were rarely challenged. "These internet stories about 1,000-yard shots and mile-long kills are complete nonsense. No one shoots that far with any kind of real accuracy. The physics don't work, the equipment isn't capable, and the human element makes it impossible." The assertion drew nods of agreement from several customers whose own experience was limited to the recreational shooting that comprised the majority of activities at Patterson's. Their understanding of ballistics was based on basic instruction and general knowledge, rather than the advanced technical education that would be necessary to evaluate the feasibility of extreme-range precision shooting. Coleman supported Marcus's position with his own analysis of the practical limitations that affected long-range accuracy. "I've shot competitively for 8 years, and I can tell you that anything beyond 400 yards is mostly luck," he stated. "The wind alone makes precision impossible, and that's not even considering all the other variables that affect bullet flight over extended distances." Emma continued her shooting routine while listening to the discussion, her expression remaining neutral, despite the technical inaccuracies she was hearing from shooters whose confidence far exceeded their actual knowledge. The conversation had moved into territory where her military experience provided insights that contradicted every assumption being expressed, but revealing such knowledge would compromise the anonymity that had protected her civilian identity for over a year. The discussion intensified when Detective Sullivan arrived for his monthly qualification session and was drawn into the debate about practical shooting distances. His law enforcement perspective added another dimension to the conversation, with observations about police sniper capabilities and the distances at which SWAT teams were trained to engage targets in urban environments. "Our department snipers are good, but their maximum effective range is maybe 200 yards under ideal conditions," Sullivan contributed. "Beyond that, you're talking about military applications that are completely different from anything civilians need to worry about. And even then, Most of those long-range military shots are exaggerated for publicity purposes. Emma's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her rifle as she heard her former profession dismissed as publicity manipulation. The shots that had earned her military decorations and established her reputation within the special operations community were being characterized as propaganda rather than genuine achievements by people whose understanding of precision marksmanship was limited to their own narrow experience. Marcus seized on Sullivan's comments to reinforce his position about the practical limitations of long-range shooting. "Exactly my point," he said. "If trained police snipers can't make reliable shots beyond 200 yards, then all these claims about extreme-range precision are just fantasy. The equipment manufacturers want people to believe their products can do impossible things, but physics is physics." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with participants sharing increasingly confident assertions about the impossibility of accurate shooting at distances that exceeded their own experience. Emma completed her predetermined shooting routine, while the discussion evolved into a comprehensive dismissal of long-range marksmanship as a legitimate shooting discipline. Coleman's final contribution to the debate included a direct challenge that would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. "I guarantee you that no one in this building could make an accurate shot at even 500 yards. Much less the ridiculous distances you see claimed online. It's all equipment marketing and internet bragging." The statement hung in the air as the group began to disperse, their confidence in their collective assessment reinforced by the mutual agreement they had reached about the limitations of practical marksmanship. Emma packed her equipment with the same methodical precision that characterized all her range activities, but her mental state had shifted in ways that would have been familiar to anyone who had served with her during combat operations. Marcus approached Lane 15 as Emma prepared to leave, his demeanor reflecting the satisfaction of someone whose expertise had been validated by the afternoon's discussion. "Good shooting today, Emma," he said, using the casual tone that had characterized their interactions for months. "That was quite a discussion we had about long-range shooting. Always amazes me how people believe those impossible claims they see on television." Emma's response was delivered with the same neutral professionalism that had marked all their previous conversations, but her words carried undertones that Marcus would only recognize in retrospect. "Distance shooting can be challenging," she agreed. "Most people probably overestimate what's possible without proper training and equipment." The conversation should have ended there, with Emma departing for another week of maintaining her civilian identity while processing the frustration of hearing her military achievements dismissed as impossible fantasies. But Marcus's next comment crossed a line that Emma hadn't realized existed until it was violated. "Honestly, Emma, I hope you don't get caught up in those ridiculous long-range shooting videos that are so popular now," Marcus continued. "Women especially seem to believe that expensive equipment can compensate for the physical and mental limitations that make extreme precision impossible. Better to focus on practical shooting skills that might actually be useful." The condescension in his tone, combined with the gender-based assumptions about capabilities, triggered something in Emma that months of careful emotional control couldn't suppress. Her military training had prepared her for many challenges, but not for the psychological pressure of having her greatest achievements dismissed by someone whose own limitations prevented him from recognizing genuine expertise when it was standing directly in front of him. Emma's response was delivered with a calmness that should have warned Marcus that he was entering dangerous territory. "What would you consider an impossible distance for accurate shooting?" she asked, her question seemingly motivated by curiosity rather than challenge. Marcus laughed, the sound carrying the dismissive confidence of someone who believed he was educating a naive customer about technical realities. "Anything beyond 300 yards is fantasy shooting," he declared, "and that's under perfect conditions with the best equipment. In the real world, with wind and other variables, accurate shooting stops being possible much shorter than that." Emma nodded thoughtfully, her expression remaining pleasant while her mind calculated distances, environmental factors, and the modifications that would be necessary to demonstrate capabilities that existed far beyond Marcus's imagination. "That's interesting," she said. "I've always wondered about those claims myself." The conversation concluded with Marcus feeling satisfied that he had provided valuable education to a customer who might otherwise be misled by unrealistic expectations about shooting capabilities. Emma departed the range with her usual quiet efficiency, but her drive home was accompanied by mental planning that hadn't been necessary since her final military mission over 2 years earlier. The decision that Emma reached during her evening routine was influenced by months of accumulated frustration over living a diminished version of herself, combined with the specific provocation of having her life's work dismissed as impossible by someone whose own abilities were so limited that he couldn't recognize genuine expertise. The psychological pressure of maintaining her false identity had been building for months, and Marcus's condescending dismissal of female capabilities had provided the catalyst that made continued silence impossible. Emma's preparation for what would happen next involved accessing equipment and capabilities that she had hoped never to need again. The storage unit across town contained resources that would transform her from an anonymous recreational shooter into something that would challenge every assumption that Marcus Patterson and his customers held about the limits of human performance with precision weapons. The woman who had endured months of patronizing advice and gender-based assumptions about her capabilities was about to demonstrate that the most dangerous mistake anyone could make was underestimating someone whose true abilities existed so far beyond their understanding that comprehension would come only through direct demonstration of skills that officially didn't exist in the civilian world. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and minimal wind conditions that Emma recognized as optimal for precision shooting at extended ranges. Her return to Patterson's shooting range was anticipated by no one, but would be remembered by everyone present as the moment when their understanding of marksmanship capabilities was permanently altered by someone who had spent over a year hiding legendary skills behind the facade of recreational shooting mediocrity. The equipment that Emma carried into the range that morning was noticeably different from her usual modest rifle and basic accessories. The case that accompanied her contained precision instruments that would have been immediately recognizable to anyone with advanced knowledge of long-range shooting systems, but appeared to be standard hunting equipment to casual observers who lacked the technical expertise to identify specialized components. Marcus Patterson's greeting reflected the casual familiarity that had developed during Emma's months as a regular customer, but he noticed the different equipment without immediately understanding its significance. "Trying something new today?" he asked, his tone suggesting mild curiosity rather than serious interest in her shooting activities. Emma's response was delivered with the same quiet professionalism that had characterized all their interactions, but her words carried implications that Marcus would only understand after witnessing their demonstration. "I thought I might try some of those distance shots we discussed yesterday," she said. "Test some of those claims about what's possible with the right approach." The statement should have prompted Marcus to explain the range's limitations and redirect Emma's attention to realistic shooting distances that could be accommodated within his facility's capabilities. Instead, his response revealed the depth of his misunderstanding about what was about to occur on his range floor. "Well, you can certainly try," Marcus replied with amusement. "But remember what we talked about yesterday. Physics doesn't change just because someone wants to believe in impossible achievements. Better to focus on improving your fundamentals at practical distances." Emma nodded in acknowledgement while completing her setup routine with modifications that prepared her shooting position for precision work that extended far beyond the capabilities Marcus imagined were possible within his facility. Her transformation from recreational shooter to precision marksman began with equipment configurations and positioning techniques that demonstrated expertise acquired through training that existed far beyond civilian applications. The morning was about to become the most significant event in Patterson's shooting range's 43-year history. Though Marcus Patterson had no understanding of what he was about to witness, or how completely his assumptions about shooting capabilities were about to be demolished by someone whose true identity would redefine everything he thought he knew about marksmanship and the hidden potential that could exist within the most unlikely people. Emma's transformation began with a methodical assembly of equipment that Marcus had never seen operated by any customer in his facility's history. The rifle that emerged from her case was a precision instrument that bore only superficial resemblance to standard hunting weapons, with modifications and accessories that indicated capabilities extending far beyond recreational applications. Her movements during the setup process carried the fluid efficiency of someone whose familiarity with such equipment had been earned through extensive professional use rather than casual hobby shooting. Marcus watched with growing confusion as Emma configured her shooting position with techniques that seemed unnecessarily complex for the simple accuracy requirements of his range facility. Her positioning involved calculations and adjustments that appeared to account for factors that shouldn't matter at the limited distances available within his building. The scope that she mounted on her rifle was substantially more sophisticated than the basic optics used by recreational shooters. with magnification capabilities and adjustment features that exceeded any practical need for 100-yard shooting. The other customers present that morning had been drawn to observe Emma's unusual preparation routine, their conversations revealing growing speculation about her intentions and equipment choices. Detective Sullivan approached Marcus with questions about the modifications being made to the normal range procedures, expressing concern that specialized equipment might create safety issues or disrupt the facility's standard operations. "What's she setting up over there?" Sullivan asked, his law enforcement experience making him naturally suspicious of activities that deviated from established patterns. "That equipment looks like it belongs at a completely different type of facility." Marcus shared Sullivan's confusion but maintained the confident demeanor that his position required when addressing customer concerns. "She mentioned wanting to try some distance shooting," he explained. "I told her yesterday that long-range accuracy claims are mostly fantasy, but she seems determined to test things for herself. Should be educational for everyone here." Brad Coleman joined the growing group of observers, his competitive shooting experience providing him with slightly better understanding of Emma's equipment configuration but no insight into her ultimate intentions. "That's definitely precision gear," he commented. "Expensive stuff, but it won't change the fundamental limitations we discussed yesterday. Physics is still physics, regardless of how much money someone spends on equipment." Emma completed her preparation routine while the speculation continued, her focus entirely devoted to calculations and adjustments that incorporated environmental factors extending far beyond the range facility's immediate vicinity. Her analysis included atmospheric pressure variations, humidity levels, and temperature gradients that would affect projectile behavior over distances that none of the observers suspected she intended to attempt. The first indication that something extraordinary was about to occur came when Emma requested access to the range's rear exit, explaining that her shooting exercise would require target placement outside the building's normal operational area. Marcus's initial response was to deny the request based on insurance liability and safety protocols that prohibited range activities from extending beyond the facility's controlled environment. "I can't authorize shooting that goes outside our established safety boundaries," Marcus stated firmly. "Our insurance coverage and local regulations are based on contained indoor activities. Whatever you're planning would need to be done at a different type of facility." Emma's response revealed the first hint of knowledge that contradicted her established identity as a recreational shooter still learning fundamental skills. "I understand the liability concerns," she replied, "but the shooting I'm proposing would be conducted under safety protocols that exceed your standard requirements. The target area I've identified is in a completely safe direction with natural backstops that provide absolute containment." Her technical language and confident assessment of safety factors suggested familiarity with shooting protocols that extended beyond casual hobby applications. Marcus found himself in the unfamiliar position of having a customer demonstrate knowledge that challenged his authority while requesting permission for activities that exceeded his facility's normal operational scope. The growing crowd of observers included several customers whose curiosity had been sparked by the unusual equipment and mysterious preparations. Jack Morrison, the retired Army sergeant, approached Emma directly with questions about her equipment and intentions, his military experience providing him with better appreciation for the sophistication of her setup than was available to purely civilian shooters. "That's some serious precision gear you've got there," Morrison observed. "Mind if I ask what kind of shooting background you have?" "That equipment suggests experience that goes beyond recreational target practice." Emma's response maintained the careful balance between acknowledging his question and protecting information that could compromise her civilian identity. "I've done some reading about precision shooting techniques," she explained. "Thought I'd see how much difference proper equipment and setup can make compared to basic recreational shooting." The answer satisfied Morrison's casual curiosity while avoiding specific claims about training or experience that might prompt more detailed questions. But her equipment configuration and preparation routine continued to suggest capabilities that contradicted her apparent status as someone still developing fundamental marksmanship skills. Marcus found himself caught between his responsibility to maintain range safety and his growing curiosity about what Emma intended to demonstrate with her sophisticated equipment setup. His experience managing the facility had never included situations where customers requested permission to conduct shooting activities that extended beyond standard operational parameters, and his normal protocols provided no guidance for evaluating such requests. The solution that Emma proposed involved a compromise that would allow her to demonstrate her capabilities while maintaining the safety and legal compliance that Marcus's facility required. She requested permission to conduct a single precision shot that would demonstrate accuracy at a distance that exceeded the range's normal capabilities but remained within legal and safety boundaries that protected both the facility and surrounding areas. "I'm proposing a single shot at a target placed at 600 yards, Emma explained, her tone carrying the technical precision that characterized professional discussions of precision shooting applications. The target location provides clear lines of sight with natural terrain features that ensure complete safety containment. The shot would be taken from your facility, but impact in an area that poses no risk to persons or property." The proposal challenged every assumption that Marcus held about practical shooting capabilities and the limitations imposed by his facility's equipment and customer base. 600 yards exceeded his understanding of what was possible for accurate shooting, particularly for someone whose previous performance had suggested competent but unremarkable recreational-level marksmanship abilities. Detective Sullivan voiced the skepticism that all the observers were feeling about Emma's proposed demonstration. 600 yards is impossible for accurate shooting, he stated flatly. "Our police snipers consider 200 yards to be their maximum effective range, and they have professional training and specialized equipment. What you're suggesting isn't physically possible." Emma's response was delivered with the calm confidence that had once characterized her most challenging military missions. "Accuracy at extended distances requires proper equipment, environmental analysis, and ballistic calculations," she explained. "The fundamentals are the same as shorter-range shooting, but the precision requirements are much more demanding." Her technical explanation revealed knowledge that contradicted her established identity, while avoiding specific claims about personal experience or training that might prompt uncomfortable questions about her background. The assembled observers listened with growing amazement as she outlined the theoretical requirements for precision shooting at distances they had considered impossible. Marcus realized that he was facing a decision that would either result in the most remarkable demonstration his facility had ever witnessed, or an embarrassing failure that would confirm his assessment of practical shooting limitations. Emma's confidence and technical knowledge suggested that she genuinely believed her proposed shot was achievable, but his experience and common sense insisted that such accuracy was impossible under any circumstances. The compromise that Marcus finally accepted was motivated by curiosity and the opportunity to definitively settle questions about long-range shooting capabilities that had been debated among his customers for years. "One shot," he agreed. "But if this turns into a safety issue or creates problems with authorities, the responsibility is entirely yours." Emma's preparation for the demonstration shot involved calculations and equipment adjustments that revealed expertise acquired through training that none of the observers suspected she possessed. Her analysis of environmental factors included wind speed measurements at multiple altitudes, atmospheric pressure calculations, and temperature assessments that affected projectile performance in ways that recreational shooters never considered. The target that Emma selected for her 600-yard shot was a standard paper bullseye that would provide clear visual confirmation of accuracy, while remaining large enough to be visible through spotting scopes that would allow observers to witness the impact. Her confidence in the shot's success was evident in her methodical preparation routine and technical discussions with observers who questioned the feasibility of her proposed demonstration. Marcus positioned himself behind a spotting scope that would allow him to observe the target area and confirm the results of Emma's shot. His expectation was that the demonstration would end with a miss that confirmed his assessment of practical shooting limitations, providing educational value for all the customers who had gathered to witness the attempt. The moment of truth arrived when Emma assumed her shooting position with modifications and techniques that demonstrated training acquired through applications that extended far beyond recreational marksmanship. Her breathing control, body positioning, and trigger manipulation revealed skills that had been developed through the kind of intensive instruction that was available only to military precision shooting specialists. The shot that Emma fired that morning redefined everything that Marcus Patterson and his customers understood about marksmanship capabilities and the hidden potential that could exist within people whose apparent limitations concealed extraordinary achievements. The sound of the rifle was followed immediately by confirmation through the spotting scope that accuracy at 600 yards was not only possible, but had been demonstrated with precision that exceeded anything the observers had imagined could be achieved by anyone, much less someone they had categorized as a recreational amateur. The impact was confirmed as a perfect center hit on the paper target, with precision that would have been impressive at 100 yards and was absolutely stunning at 6 times that distance. The mathematical impossibility they had just witnessed was followed by a revelation that would forever change their understanding of the quiet woman who had spent over a year concealing legendary capabilities behind the facade of recreational shooting mediocrity. Emma's true identity emerged through the questions and explanations that followed her demonstration shot, revealing military achievements and combat experience that established her as one of the most accomplished precision shooters in recent history. The records she had set and missions she had completed existed so far beyond civilian comprehension that the assembled observers struggled to process the reality of what they had witnessed and who had been shooting alongside them without recognition for over a year. Marcus Patterson's assumptions about shooting capabilities, gender limitations, and his own expertise had been challenged and demolished by someone whose true abilities exceeded everything in his experience or imagination. The range master, who had confidently declared that no one could shoot accurately at extended distances, had just witnessed perfection at a range he had considered impossible, delivered by someone he had categorized as an amateur recreational shooter whose capabilities were limited by both gender and inexperience. The afternoon that followed Emma's demonstration became a comprehensive education for everyone present about the reality of precision shooting capabilities and the hidden achievements that could exist within people whose appearances concealed extraordinary backgrounds. Her willingness to reveal aspects of her military service provided insights into training methods, equipment capabilities, and operational requirements that existed far beyond civilian understanding but were now made accessible through direct demonstration and explanation. The transformation of Patterson's shooting range began that day with the recognition that exceptional capabilities could exist within people whose apparent limitations concealed achievements that redefined the possible. Emma Chen had proven that legends don't disappear when they choose civilian life. They simply learn to hide in plain sight until circumstances require them to remind the world of what true expertise looks like when applied without restriction or concealment. The silence that followed Emma's impossible shot stretched for nearly 30 seconds as every observer struggled to process what they had witnessed through their spotting scopes. Marcus Patterson's hands trembled as he adjusted the magnification, confirming again and again that the hole in the center of the 600-yard target was real, precise, and completely contrary to everything he had believed about the limits of human marksmanship. Detective Sullivan was the first to break the stunned quiet, his voice carrying the disbelief of someone whose professional understanding of firearms capabilities had just been shattered. "That's not possible," he whispered, then louder. "That shot is not physically possible at that distance." Emma remained in her shooting position for several moments longer, her breathing steady and controlled as she performed the mental checklist that had concluded every precision shot during her military career. When she finally rose from behind her rifle, her transformation was complete and irreversible. The uncertain recreational shooter who had asked basic questions about scope adjustments had been replaced by someone whose bearing and confidence commanded immediate recognition of professional expertise. The bullet traveled 612 yards in 1.7 seconds, Emma stated matter-of-factly, her voice carrying the technical precision that characterized briefings in operational environments. Impact velocity was approximately 1,800 feet per second, with a trajectory drop of 47 inches compensated through scope elevation adjustments calculated for current atmospheric conditions. Brad Coleman stared at her with an expression that shifted from disbelief to dawning recognition. "Who are you?" he asked, the question carrying implications that extended far beyond simple curiosity about her shooting background. Emma's response revealed the first details of an identity that had been hidden beneath months of carefully maintained anonymity. Staff Sergeant Emma Chen, retired. Formerly assigned to the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Precision marksman. Classified operations. 15 years of service. The words hung in the air like an explosion that continued to reverberate through the consciousness of everyone present. Marcus felt his legs weaken as the implications of what he had been witnessing for over a year crashed over him like a physical force. The woman he had patronized and dismissed had been one of the military's most elite operators, someone whose achievements existed at levels he couldn't have imagined in his most ambitious fantasies. Jack Morrison, whose own military service had given him some understanding of special operations hierarchies, was the first to grasp the full significance of Emma's revelation. "Delta Force," he breathed, You're talking about Tier 1 operations, the kind of missions that never get acknowledged. Emma nodded, her expression revealing the psychological relief that came from finally abandoning the civilian facade that had protected her anonymity but demanded the constant suppression of her true identity. My longest confirmed elimination was 2,847 meters in Afghanistan. The target was a high-value individual coordinating attacks against coalition forces from a position he believed was beyond engagement range. The distance she cited was so far beyond anything the observers had considered possible that they initially struggled to convert the measurement into familiar terms. When the realization struck that Emma was describing a shot of nearly 2 miles, the silence returned with even greater intensity than before. Marcus found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. 2 miles? You're saying you killed someone from 2 miles away? The mission required precision beyond normal operational parameters, Emma replied, her tone carrying the matter-of-fact delivery that characterized discussions of technical achievements rather than moral judgments. Environmental conditions were optimal, target identification was confirmed through multiple intelligence sources, and collateral damage assessment indicated minimal risk to civilian populations. Detective Sullivan's law enforcement training provided him with enough context to understand the strategic implications of such capabilities. Those kinds of shots affect entire theaters of operation, he said. Eliminating key personnel from distances they can't even imagine changes the tactical situation for thousands of troops. Emma's explanation of her military service revealed achievements that redefined the observer's understanding of what individual skill and training could accomplish in the modern warfare environment. Her decorations included recognition for actions that had influenced international conflicts, though the classified nature of her operations meant that most of her achievements would never be publicly acknowledged or celebrated. The psychological transformation that occurred as Emma revealed her true background was profound for everyone present, but particularly devastating for Marcus, whose confidence in his own expertise and judgment had been built on decades of experience that now seemed laughably inadequate. The woman he had treated as a novice requiring basic instruction was actually someone whose knowledge of ballistics, marksmanship, and precision shooting exceeded his understanding by orders of magnitude. "I need to sit down," Marcus said, his voice reflecting the shock of someone whose fundamental assumptions about reality had been proven catastrophically wrong. "I've been giving you advice about shooting. I've been telling you what was possible and what wasn't. And you've been learning to be a civilian," Emma finished for him. "Trying to find a way to exist in a world where my skills weren't needed, and my identity was a liability. Your range provided me with a place to maintain basic proficiency while remaining anonymous." The equipment that Emma had used for her demonstration shot was revealed to be precision instruments that represented the cutting edge of military marksmanship technology. Her rifle had been configured with modifications that enabled accuracy at distances that civilian manufacturers didn't advertise, because such capabilities exceeded any legal hunting or competitive shooting requirements. Brad Coleman's competitive shooting experience provided him with enough technical knowledge to recognize that Emma's equipment represented capabilities that existed far beyond commercial availability. "That's military-grade precision gear," he observed, "the kind of stuff that's restricted to government contracts and special operations units." Emma confirmed his assessment while explaining that her civilian shooting activities had been deliberately limited to avoid revealing capabilities that might compromise her anonymity or generate unwanted attention from government agencies who preferred that former special operations personnel maintain low profiles during their transitions to civilian life. The crowd that had gathered to witness Emma's demonstration shot grew throughout the afternoon as word spread through the local shooting community about the impossible accuracy that had been achieved at Patterson's range. Customers who arrived for routine practice sessions found themselves drawn into discussions about precision shooting capabilities and the hidden expertise that could exist within people whose appearances concealed extraordinary backgrounds. Marcus's initial shock gradually evolved into a combination of embarrassment and admiration as he began to understand the scope of Emma's achievements and the patience she had demonstrated while enduring his condescending advice and gender-based assumptions about shooting capabilities. His apologies were sincere but inadequate for addressing the months of systematic underestimation that Emma had absorbed while maintaining her protective anonymity. "I don't know what to say," Marcus admitted, his voice carrying the humility of someone whose professional confidence had been permanently altered by revelations that challenged everything he thought he knew about marksmanship and human potential. I've been completely wrong about everything. About you. About what's possible. About my own understanding of shooting." Emma's response demonstrated the grace and professionalism that had characterized her military service and civilian transition. "You provided me with exactly what I needed," she replied. "A place to practice basic skills without questions or attention. Your range gave me a refuge where I could maintain some connection to shooting without revealing capabilities that would have complicated my civilian life." The afternoon evolved into an impromptu education session, as Emma shared insights about precision shooting techniques, ballistic calculations, and equipment capabilities that existed far beyond civilian applications. Her explanations were technical and comprehensive, providing the assembled observers with knowledge that would have been impossible to acquire through conventional civilian channels. Detective Sullivan's questions focused on the operational requirements and training methods that had developed Emma's extraordinary capabilities. Her responses revealed training programs that pushed human performance to absolute limits, while developing the psychological conditioning necessary for precision shooting under extreme stress and life-threatening conditions. The selection process eliminated 90% of candidates before advanced training even began, Emma explained. Physical requirements were secondary to psychological stability and the ability to make precise calculations under combat stress. Mental conditioning was more important than natural shooting talent. Jack Morrison's military background provided him with context for understanding the institutional support and resources that had been invested in developing Emma's capabilities. "The cost of training someone to your level must be enormous," he observed. "Years of specialized instruction, equipment, and operational experience." Emma confirmed that her training had represented a multi-million-dollar investment by the military in developing capabilities that were essential for strategic operations, but impossible to replace once lost through retirement or transition to civilian life. Her decision to leave active duty had been met with significant resistance from commands that understood the rarity and value of her expertise. The revelation of Emma's true identity had immediate implications for Patterson's shooting range that extended far beyond the afternoon's demonstrations. Word of the impossible shot and the legendary marksman who had been practicing in anonymity spread rapidly through shooting communities across the region, generating interest from competitive organizations, military veterans, and precision shooting enthusiasts who sought opportunities to learn from someone whose achievements existed at the pinnacle of the discipline. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of having his facility associated with someone whose capabilities could attract national attention, from shooting sports organizations and potentially government agencies who monitored the activities of former special operations personnel. The transformation of his modest range into a destination for serious precision shooting enthusiasts would require significant modifications to accommodate the advanced techniques and extended distances that Emma's presence had revealed to be possible. The personal relationship between Marcus and Emma was permanently altered by the revelations of the afternoon, but in ways that reflected mutual respect rather than the previous dynamic of instructor and student. Marcus's recognition of Emma's extraordinary achievements was tempered by his understanding that she had chosen to conceal such capabilities rather than seek recognition or commercial advantage from her military background. Emma's decision to reveal her identity had been prompted by the cumulative effect of months spent suppressing her true capabilities, combined with the specific provocation of having her life's work dismissed as impossible by someone whose own limitations prevented recognition of genuine expertise. The psychological relief of abandoning her civilian facade was profound, but it also meant the end of the anonymity that had protected her from unwanted attention and expectations. The afternoon concluded with Emma's commitment to provide occasional instruction for serious students who could benefit from exposure to precision shooting techniques that existed far beyond conventional civilian training. Her willingness to share knowledge represented a compromise between her desire for privacy and recognition that her expertise could benefit others who were dedicated to developing advanced marksmanship capabilities. Marcus Patterson's understanding of shooting capabilities, equipment limitations, and his own expertise had been fundamentally transformed by witnessing achievements that exceeded everything in his experience or imagination. The rangemaster who had confidently declared that accurate shooting beyond 300 yards was impossible had learned that legends don't disappear when they choose civilian life. They simply wait for the right moment to remind the world what true mastery looks like when finally revealed. Emma Chen's story became part of the folklore at Patterson's shooting range, inspiring countless discussions about hidden potential, the importance of respecting capabilities that might not be immediately apparent, and the extraordinary achievements that could exist within people whose appearances concealed remarkable backgrounds. Her impossible shot had proven that sometimes the most dangerous assumption anyone could make was underestimating the quiet person whose true abilities existed far beyond their understanding or imagination. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.